A lot of times, thievery is just thought of as the lock picker, and that's pretty much all they can do. But you can do so much more with the skill. You can earn an income picking pockets using the steal action. Maybe you can perform some street magic by doing palm an object in order to earn some income. You can also disable and disarm devices, and if you're good enough, you can do it without leaving a trace. And the same thing with picking a lock. That is something you can do, even though it is a thing that most people kind of think of. But when you think of thievery, I want you to think of the manipulate action. The manipulate action is kind of what separates thievery from stealth. My name is Don. I'm trying to be the sly strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. So, thievery is a dexterity based skill, and it basically means that you are trained in a particular set of skills that are favored by thieves and miscreants. That's the manual's words, not mine. Thievery is once again kind of defined by the manipulate. You are manipulating objects using these things, and the manipulate trait is kind of what I want you to key on once we're going over these skills we're going to be going over and these actions. But let's go ahead and get into the first of the two categories, and the first of that is untrained things you can do with thievery. Now, the first one I'd like to talk about is palm an object. Palm an object is single action, and it does have the manipulate trait. What you are doing is you are trying to grab a small, unattended object off a surface, off anywhere without being noticed. It does require you to roll a single thievery check, and you are doing that against the perception DC of anyone who could observe you. So if it's one person, it's against their perception DC. If there are multiple people around when you're doing it, you have to do it against all of those people. Now, no matter what happens, you take the object. It's just whether you do it unobserved. And those are the conditions of this particular action. The other thing that is pretty important to remember is it has to be small and of negligible weight. Small because you're literally trying to palm the object, and negligible weight because if it is heavy, you are going to wind up tensing, you're going to wind up shifting your shoulder or shifting your hips or something along those lines to make it more noticeable. Now, the two conditions are success, you successfully palm the object and no one notices. On a failure, you still palm the object, you are just observed, and it's up to the GM to determine what's going to happen because you were observed. The second one is the steal action. Now, the steal action is also a single action, and it does have the manipulate trait. But what you are trying to do is you are trying to do a similar object, a small, not heavily weighed object, or you are trying to take that from a creature without being noticed. So as opposed to a surface, you're trying to do it from a creature. Has to be negligible bulk, once again, has to be small, and you will automatically fail if the creature is in combat or on guard. Generally speaking, because they are in a heightened sense of awareness at that point. You are going to be attempting a thievery check to determine if you actually steal the object. The DC to steal is most often the perception DC of the person you are trying to steal from, as well as any potential observers to your steal action. It assumes that the object is in a worn location but not closely observed. What we mean by that is something maybe along a long leather thong around their neck, or something on a belt pouch, or something tied onto their backpack. Those things are kind of what you think of when you are trying to do a steal action. If you are trying to pickpocket, literally take something out of someone's pockets or something that is underneath the shirt or close against the body, you could take up to a -5 penalty to your thievery check. The GM might increase the DC of your check if the nature of the object makes it hard to steal. It could be maybe long and thin, but still negligible weight. It could be glowing. It could be shiny. It could be held really close to the body or right up front, somewhere where you might actually have to wave it in front of the person's face as you are trying to steal it. So these are all things that could affect the DC. And also, maybe you're trying to take a single thing out of a multitude, like a single piece of paper out of a whole stack of parchments. Those would affect the DC as well. You might also need to Do a thievery check against the perception DC of any observers to make sure that they don't notice you steal the item. And the GM might increase the perception DCs to make it easier for you to steal if there is some distraction going on. So teamwork does work for steal as well. If someone is distracting any potential observers, 2 conditions for this: success, you successfully steal the object without the creature noticing and without being perceived by anybody else observing. A failure means that you are either observed during the action or the creature notices it while you are trying to steal the object. So you do not automatically get the object, unlike palm an object. And the GM is going to determine what type of response that particular creature is going to have. Now let's go ahead and move on to our trained actions. Now, similar to the untrained actions, there are 2 trained actions that are directly under the Thievery skill. And both these are similar as well, and both have a manipulate trait. The first we're going to cover is disable a device. Now, disable a device might require you to have thieves' tools or might not. It depends on what the device is and what the GM determines. But this action allows you to disarm a trap or some other complex device. A lot of times, there will be multiple checks you have to do in order to disable a particularly complex device. These tools will be helpful, and sometimes they're going to be required to disable a device, but the GM is the one who's going to determine that. And it also might require a higher proficiency rank than what you might have. For example, if it's very complex, you might need to be higher than trained. You might need to be expert, master, or legendary in order to be able to actually get rid of the device. And your thievery check results determines how much progress you have made against the DC of the actual device you're trying to disarm. On a critical success, if it is a simple device, you'll disarm it, no problem. If it's a complex device, you basically go through 2 stages of disarming, and you will also leave no trace and have the ability to rearm that particular device if such a state exists. On a success, you disable a device if it's a simple device, or go through 1 stage if it's a multiple. As far as whether it'll be noticeable or not, you'll leave scratches or you'll leave little marks, but that's dependent on the next upcoming observer on whether that will be important or not. And on a failure, once again, you fail. On a critical failure, though, you totally trigger the device and whatever action that was going to happen out of it. So it's not particularly something you want to do. The next one we're going to talk about is pick a lock. Very similar, still 2 actions to do. A success will allow you to pick the lock, or if it's a complex lock, allow you to go through 1 stage of that particular lock. But the DC is determined by the complexity and the construction of the lock you are trying to pick. Kind of just like disabling a device, and as we said, there might be multiple stages. That way, and it's actually written in the manual like this, is that, someone who just randomly starts checking against it and rolling and just waiting to hit that natural 20, it's a lot easier to do it that way. And if you have multiple stages, then it isn't just an automatic thing for someone who isn't very good at thievery, but they just happen to be trained in the skill. You do need thieves' tools for this, but the GM might allow you to use improvised tools with a penalty because they're shoddy if you can find something that might work, paper clips or needles or things of that sort. The normal success conditions that this thing has is very similar to disable a device. On a critical success, you unlock it, or you go through 2 stages of unlocking and you kind of do it without a trace. On a success, you open the lock if it's a single stage, or go through 1 stage if it's a multiple stage lock. On a failure, you just don't do it. And on a critical failure, you break your tools. And if you break your tools, you can get another set if someone else in your party happens to have one. Or you might have to go get another set and buy one. You might be able to try some improvised tools if your GM allows it, but once again, those will be treated as shoddy. Now, I hope this little guide maybe made you think about thievery a little bit different. Thievery is all about manipulation of objects and things, and some of the other things you think of thieves doing are more stealth. So try not to confuse the two too much. Although, once again, a quick look at the manual will definitely clear that up for you. But thievery is all about manipulating objects. I hope this did help you. Maybe you thought of it a little different or came up with some new ideas, and I do hope you liked it. And if you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.